Hey, today we're going to be continuing on in our summer sermon series called A Summer of Psalms. And if you have your Bible, you can pull it out and open up to Psalm 16. Maybe some of you prefer the phone, so pull out your app and we'll be in Psalm 16. That's where we'll spend the majority of our time today. I want to take a moment and welcome all of my friends over at the Neely campus. We're so glad that you're here with us today, and also those of you who are watching online. And before we get started, I want to take a moment today and share with you a little bit about what God is doing at the Neely campus. Pastor Chris talked earlier about us launching 2 campuses back on March 25th, and today I have the privilege of taking just a moment before we start and sharing with you what God is doing on that campus. And it's really exciting to see people responding to Christ in our services on Sunday morning. It's amazing to see people submitting their lives to Christ in our discipleship groups. And I'm so pleased, I'm so excited to tell you that last summer when we were planning and kind of strategizing for what it was going to look like to launch a campus, we had to kind of pick a number. We didn't really know how many people would come, so we had to kind of pick a number, and we went with 225 people. We said if we can launch with 225 people, we'll feel really good about kind of getting that thing off the ground. And it's really a privilege for me to tell you today that since we launched at the Neely campus, we have averaged between 375 and 400 people on a Sunday morning. That's amazing. Yeah, give it up. Super fun. I mean, the average church in America is 200 people. So to see God bringing these people, people literally walking up from the neighborhood, and to watch people invite their friends. Our launch team watched them invite their friends, and watch people invite their Uber drivers. It's really true what they say, that when new churches come, it means new people. And so let me just take a moment and thank you. Thank you for seeing the vision of reaching people. Thank you for sending us out. And I'm just excited to be able to share with you today. And so, last week, Pastor Daniel launched us into this summer sermon series, and he preached last Sunday through Psalm chapter 1 and Psalm chapter 2. And let me just tell you, if you missed that, you're going to want to go back and catch that podcast, because he really did an amazing job of kind of laying the foundation for our whole summer series. And as we start today, I feel like I need to ask you a deep and theological question. Are you ready for this? I don't think you're ready. Are you ready for this? What did we do before turn-by-turn navigation? No, seriously. What did we do before turn-by-turn navigation? I can already see it. Some of you are sitting out there and you're going, you millennials and all your technology. But seriously, you remember the days of landlines and like paper maps? I remember my dad in our station wagon, Chrysler station wagon. He's pulling out this giant paper map, and it's like from floorboard to ceiling, and he's reading this thing, and it always felt like he was reading some kind of hieroglyphics. And my guess is some of us, if not most of us in here, would be completely lost if we ever had to read a paper map. In fact, why don't you look at your neighbor and go, oh, you would definitely be lost. Today, the title of our message is Turn-by-Turn Sanctification. Turn-by-turn sanctification. And sanctification is just kind of it's a churchy word that you're going to hear and like if you read a bunch of theological books, but here's what it really means. It basically just means becoming more like Jesus. And today I want to dive into Psalm chapter 16, and I want to look at what David has to say, what King David has to say about a life that would be surrounded with security and peace and joy. And so he says in Psalm 16, verse 11, "You make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand there are pleasures forevermore." And I want to begin our time today kind of with the end in mind. I want to look at this last verse where David's talking about this life that is full of joy and peace and stability and security. And then I kind of want to work our way backwards. I want to look at the building blocks that David puts in place. It's kind of like when you go to a really good restaurant. You know what I'm talking about? Like when you go, not here in town, but like you go to a really good restaurant and you taste something and you go, that is good. right? Like, I can see it, some of your mouths are watering right now. You know what I'm talking about here. Like, it tastes so wonderful. And those of us who like to cook a little bit, we go, what is it that tastes so good in there? Is it the oregano, or is it the parsley, or is it the bay leaf? And we have to understand that when we want to get to the end product, there are some specific directions, some specific turns, if you will, that we have to follow in order for us to get where we want to be. See, the end result is great, but there's some specific things that help us get to that place. In fact, 2 weeks ago, I was in Dallas, and I was at a family wedding, and I was talking to Allie's cousin, Duke, who is from Minnesota, right? And he was talking about how that morning, he and his wife had gone, and they had met some friends in downtown Dallas at a restaurant, and he actually asked the question, like, what did we do before technology? He was going, I would have had to actually like set a destination before we ever went, and then we would have had to actually stick to that destination. And if I would have come to any traffic, or if I would have come to any kind of construction, like I couldn't just text them and say, hey, we're running late. Some of you guys do that all the time. I do that. Hey, 15 minutes late, sorry about that. And you couldn't just change your mind, right? As you were going, like, man, Texas burger doesn't sound that good today. Like, I kind of want some roses. And so this was life before, technology and turn-by-turn navigation. But what's so effective about turn-by-turn navigation is that we know the destination before we ever start the journey. You see, your path is laid out before you ever leave for the journey. And the last few verses of Psalm 16 describe this clear path of a life that is full of joy. It's full of security. It's full of peace. And some of you walk into this church today, and that's not how your life is going right now. Your marriage, if you're just kind of being honest with somebody, your marriage is on the rocks, it's on the brink, and there is no joy in your home right now. Maybe your job has you running from place to place to place. You feel like a chicken with your head cut off, and you got no peace. There's like no peace right now. In fact, it's keeping you up at night. And we live in the Permian Basin right now. And so as I talk about peace and joy and security, I don't know about you, but I want some of that in my life. Yes? Okay. So let's see what it is that David has to say in Psalm 16 that led him to understanding that the end product is peace, stability, security. Psalm chapter 16, verse 1, preserve me, O God, for in you I take refuge. I say to the Lord, you are my Lord. I have no good apart from you. Man, right out of the gate, David brings the heat. He says, you are the one who's in charge. You are the one who I take my refuge in. When I need something, when I need a place to go that's safe, I go to you, Lord. He understands this concept of lordship. Everybody say lordship. You think lordship is a big deal to God? You better believe it is. It's one of the main themes that we see throughout the New Testament. Some 600 times we see this concept of lordship. And David understands this. He understands that God is the one who's in charge. He understands that God is his refuge. It's the place that he can go to feel safe. He calls him Lord. But then David goes on. He says, enough about you, Lord. Let's talk about me. He says, I have no good apart from you. I don't know about you, but when I hear that, I kind of go, really, David? No good? Like none? Not even a little bit? He's like the complete opposite of Stuart Smalley. You guys remember Stuart Smalley from Saturday Night Live back in the early 2000s? He was this kind of little man that would wear a cardigan, and he would sit in front of the mirror, and he had his daily affirmation. He would say, I'm good enough, and I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. Not David. See, David, he understands his place before a holy and a righteous God. Kind of reminds me of yesterday. I was cleaning out the sink. Allie came to me and she said, hey, she said, can you go look at the sink in our bathroom because it's kind of draining weird or not draining, and it kind of stinks. And so I opened up that little P-trap. Some of you know what I'm talking about here. And it was like the most putrid smell I've ever smelled in my life. There was things hanging from the pipe. It was disgusting, right? And can we just be honest about our funk for a minute? Man, like before a holy and righteous God, David understands his place. And church, I think we should too. Today, we need to understand that we have no good apart from God. Outside of the redeeming work of Jesus, we are a mess. I am a mess, and so are you. You see, we're terrible lords of our life. We're really, really bad at trying to run things in our life. And if we can just be honest today, we can just be real about how calloused we are and how black our heart is. I love the way the One-to-One book describes lordship. It says, if he's not Lord of all, he's not Lord at all. If he's not Lord of all, he's not Lord at all. And I think this is the way we need to start every day. We need to understand that he is the one who's in charge. And so I would just ask you the question today, is he the Lord of your life? If your first turn in your turn-by-turn directions is not to put him in charge or to put him in charge of every single area of your life, you're never going to reach that destination of peace and joy and security, that final destination. You see, the path to life that David speaks of in verse 11, it begins with a heart submitted to God's ways above my ways. He goes on, verse 3. As for the saints in the land, they are the excellent ones, in whom is all of my delight. The sorrows of those who run after another God shall multiply. Here we see a shift. We see David kind of move from placing God in his rightful place in his life, from talking about his own depravity to a realization. And the realization is that the people that we spend our time with, it directly has an impact on our affections for God. The people that we spend our time with, it has a direct impact on how we love God. And David says, I delight in the saints of God. It's so fun for me to be back here after a couple months today and see some of my friends. And I see you running hard after God. I haven't seen you in a few months, but man, I see some of you. You're here serving the Lord. You're here making coffee, or you're here greeting people, and it's a delight. It's a delight to watch people go and launch new churches. Watch a whole team go to Odessa and go, we're doing this for the kingdom of God. And it's a delight to watch people serve the Lord. But there's a whole lot of other people in this community that have no interest. They have no interest in doing it God's way. And I know for sure that there are some of us that come in here today and we see that play out every day in our own life. We see it in our family. We see it in our aunts and our uncles. We see it with our parents, maybe. We see it with our brothers or our sisters. And here's what this psalm tells us. It says, these kind of people who are chasing after another God, they bring sorrow and lots of it. It multiplies. And you see this. You see this in your own family. You watch people, you watch your parents, or you watch your brothers and sisters or your friends, and you see them trying to do it their own way, and it just goes into the same cycle of sorrow and sorrow and sorrow. There's some of you in here, some of you single ladies. I can't hear single ladies without thinking of Beyonce, right? Okay, sorry. If you didn't get that joke, you probably still read a paper map, but that's okay, right? Okay, so some of you single ladies in here, Just kidding. I lost some people right there. Okay. So some of you single ladies in here, you have this really bad habit of dating men who are not running after the Lord. You're just not. Like, you just go through this cycle continually, and it's fun at first, and everything's going well, and then sorrow comes, and pain, and hurt. And you've been down this road before. Church, our relationships have a big impact on how we're gonna run after God. Lordship, relationship. David understands this. And I couldn't help but feel this while I was preparing this message and praying for you guys this week. I couldn't help but feel the prompting of the Lord to really just challenge you today. That there's some of us that walk into this building today, that we walk into this church, you walk into the Neely campus today, and there's a relationship that you need to get out of your life. And you know who you are, and you know what that relationship is. And I'm gonna just challenge you today, it's time to deal with it. Because that relationship has brought you sorrow multiplied over and over and over. And David says, the saints, they bring delight. I have friends in this church, I have friends in this community that when I spend time with them, they bring me joy, they bring me peace. I actually like spending time with them. And some of us in here, we don't even know what that looks like. I heard it said this way: watch who has your back and who backs out on you. Watch who has your back and who backs out on you. You see, if you want more peace and you want more joy, you want more stability in your life, I'll just ask you, who are you spending your time with? Who are you spending your time with? David understood. He understood this concept. His roadmap to joy and security and peace is built around relationships of folks who love God and serve him. He goes on. Verse 5. The Lord is my chosen portion and my cup. You hold my lot. The lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Indeed, I have a beautiful inheritance. I bless the Lord who gives me counsel in the night, and also my heart instructs me. I think this is where the rubber meets the road for David in these 3 verses, and let's talk about why. These words that we see in this passage, lot, portion, cup, inheritance. These are monetary terms in David's time when he was writing this psalm. You see, our first turn was lordship. Our second turn was relationship. Our third term is stewardship. The way that we understand these words, it's really pretty simple. God, what you have given me is enough. God, what you have given me is enough. The money in my bank account or my savings account, it's enough. The car that I drive, even though it's busted and it makes weird noises when I start it sometime, it's enough. The clothes that I wear, the clothes that my kids wear, it's enough. The house that I live in, the apartment that I live in, it's enough. And I know what you're thinking. Andrew, we live in the Permian Basin. It doesn't feel like enough. Look at your neighbor and say, it does not feel like enough. But God has provided for you. It is enough. But like the Motel 6, it's like $250 a night here. We live in the craziest place on earth, it feels like, right? When it comes to money, it's like $1,800 to live in a 1-bedroom apartment. What are you talking about, Pastor? You're crazy. See, I get it. Most weeks, sometimes it doesn't feel like enough, but I would say your money issues They may not be a provision issue. It may very, very well be a stewardship issue. Stewardship, it's a word that we don't hear in our culture very often, but it really comes down to the idea that God is the one who owns it all, and I'm just a manager. And so are you. We're just managers, and I get it. We talked about lordship earlier. I get it. It's this concept of, is God in charge of your finances? Are you running your budget through his ways, or are you kind of trying to do it your own way? And it'd be real easy for me to stand up here before you and say, oh man, it always works great in my life. But literally just a week and a half ago, Allie and I were sitting down and we were doing our June budget. And it was one of these great little months where we had a few little extra income things. It was going to be like, yes, this is going to be great. It's going to go so good, right? Because sometimes the budget meeting goes well and is happy, and sometimes it ends in tears. But I had a feeling this was going to be a good one. Sure enough, we start working through the budget, and I'm watching it disappear. Ding, 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 ding. We get to the end, and I just start going all Eeyore. I never have enough. Never get to save any money. Let me drive this car forever. Allie had every right to just bring out the mallet. Bah! Just whop me across the face. But she didn't. She was gracious. She just began to remind me of God's provision in our life. She began to remind me of this time he provided, and this time he provided, and how he took care of this. She began to remind me that despite my sin, that God calls me a son. He calls me an heir. He calls me a friend. Church, what God has given you is enough. He calls you a son. He calls you a daughter of the Most High God. And if you're going to follow God's path for peace and joy and resting in his provision, you need to follow these things. 1, remember God's faithfulness in providing for you in the past. 2, follow God's principles when it comes to finances. And 3, get help. Get help. Man, those of you who know us, we are not detail people. But a couple years ago, we took the Dave Ramsey class, and it helped us so much. It helped us so much. So here's your little shameless plug. We start the Dave Ramsey class on August 8th at this campus and the Neely campus. If you're having money issues and you're always running out of money before you run out of month, go to Dave Ramsey class. Lordship, relationship, stewardship. He goes on. I have set the Lord always before me. Because he is at my right hand, I shall not be shaken. Therefore my heart is glad, and my whole being rejoices. My flesh also dwells secure, for you will not abandon my soul to Sheol, or let your Holy One see corruption. You see, when you're using turn-by-turn navigation, you got to know where you're going. You got to understand the different turns. If you miss a turn, it'll help you, right? But you also have to know your current location. I remember early in marriage, we were going to a party, and it just happened to be in Dallas. I had grown up in Dallas, so I know Dallas pretty well. And we were trying to find where we were going. Now, here was where kind of our disagreement began. I knew exactly where I was, but Allie kept telling me I was lost. I was like, it's on. I know where I am. I know my current location. I just don't know where I'm going. And some of you walk in here today, and you know exactly where your current location is. You're angry. You're depressed. You feel abandoned. You feel lonely. A life of peace and joy and security feels light years away. And some 1,000 years before Jesus ever walked the streets of Galilee, before he ever gave his life in Jerusalem, we see David speaking of the Holy One. We see David not acting just as a king or as a shepherd, but we see him acting as a prophet. He prophesies about the Holy One who's always before him. And you can sense his peace. You can sense when he says that he won't be shaken, he knows what his current location is. I'm constantly amazed when I watch people walk through, and I've seen it over the years here. I see people walk through the hardest situations that you can imagine. And somehow or another, in the midst of those situations, they find peace, and they find joy, and they find security, and it's because they know where their current location is. They are rooted in Jesus. He is the one who will not let them be shaken. But I know that in a room this size, some of us walk in here today and we're desperate. We're at our wits' end. We're at the end of our rope, and we don't know where our current location is. We're shaken, and today I have good news for you. You see, the good news is just simply the message of the gospel. That's all that word gospel means, is good news. It's the good news that God became man in Jesus. It's what we talk about at Christmas, that he became Emmanuel. He became God with us. That's the good news. But it doesn't just stay there. He walked along streets across the sea. And he taught an amazing message to people of love and hope. And then he died a death that I should have died. Just like you, we're all a mess outside of what Jesus has done for us. And if the story were to end there, that he just died a death that I should have died, that wouldn't be a great story. But that's not how the story ends. 3 days later, he rose from the grave, proving that he is God. And he would offer you today, he would offer me today the gift of salvation and forgiveness of sins. He offers hope. He offers a life of stability and peace and joy. And David knew about this 1,000 years before Jesus ever walked in the earth. So can I get everybody to stand up with me at this point? If today you walk into this church, if you walk into the Neely campus, if you're watching online, if you walk into here just feeling abandoned, lonely, depressed, you don't know where your current location is, there's good news for you. You bow your head. If that's you today, you never found your current location in Jesus, I want you to just raise your hand. I want to pray for you. You can just repeat this in your heart. God, I'm broken. I'm in need. I'm sinful. Father, I need you. I accept the free gift that you offer. Thank you for your grace and your mercy in my life. Thank you for what you've done for me on the cross. I want you to be in charge. If today you come into this place and he's not the Lord of your life, if you do have some relationships that are taking you away from God, if you if you haven't been running your stewardship according to his principles, just raise your hand as a sign to God. God, I pray for these people, your sons and your daughters, Lord, who just confessed to you today, I haven't been doing it your way, but today's the day I want to see a change, Lord. I need that life of security and peace and joy. God, I pray for them, that you would help them, that you would restore their soul, that you would allow them to never be shaken. Father, thank you for this time in your word. We love you. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.